I didn't recognize the sound of my own key not fitting. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. It slid into the lock, turned once, and then stopped. Clean, smooth, final. No jam, no struggle. Just rejection in metal form. I stood there in the dim hallway, 2 grocery bags cutting into my fingers, my breath a pale cloud in the draft drifting through the old brick corridor I'd walked for nearly 40 years. Before I could even knock, the door opened. Brittany filled the frame, lit from behind like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Hair pulled tight, coat cinched at the waist, every line of her posture announcing she owned whatever space she stood in. "Your key won't work anymore," she said, voice smooth as glass. "We changed the locks this afternoon." For a heartbeat, I waited for her to laugh. For a little smile, a quick shake of her head, anything that didn't sound like banishment. But she only offered a polite, polished smile that never touched her eyes. "I don't understand," I said quietly. "This is my building." Her hand stayed on the doorknob, unmoving. "Not anymore. Michael and I are moving in. You should start packing what's left of your things. Nursing homes are cheaper than heating oil, you know." Her words landed like tiny, precise cuts, sharp enough to sting, restrained enough to not leave a visible mark. My heart thumped once, hard, then everything inside me fell still. I looked past her shoulder into the apartment, my apartment, and saw the hollowed-out shape of what used to be my life. The photographs that once lined the entryway were gone. So was the armchair my husband had filled with the weight of his shoulders. The living room looked stripped, staged. It didn't even smell like home. "Where's Michael?" I asked, though I already knew. The silence behind her was answer enough. She shifted, blocking my view. "Busy. You know how he gets. But don't worry, I told him I'd handle this. We're starting our life here as a family, Abby. It's time you moved on." My name sounded foreign in her mouth, like something she spat out by accident. I tightened my grip on the plastic bags, cans of soup, a loaf of bread, a carton of milk. Groceries meant for the same people now looking at me like a problem to be cleared away. "This building is mine," I said, steady but quiet. "The deed, the taxes, every inch of it." She let out a small laugh, soft, dismissive. "Documents can change, sweetheart. Families evolve. You've had your time." Sweetheart, I had raised a boy who once hugged me after every baseball game, who cried when I burned my hand making dinner, who swore I would never be alone. Now his wife stood in my doorway using sweetheart like an insult. My throat tightened, but I refused to let her see it. Pride is the last coat you wear before the cold hits. "Brittany," I said carefully, "you're making a mistake." For a flicker of a moment, something sharpened in her eyes. Annoyance, maybe even fear. But it vanished just as quickly. She saw me as old, harmless, too polite to fight back. "The only mistake," she said, "was letting things stay in your name this long. But don't worry, Michael and I will take care of everything. You won't have to lift a finger again." She leaned her shoulder against the doorframe, tilting her head as if posing for a camera. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You should be grateful we're giving you this much time." The words were soft, but they hit me like a slammed door. I could smell her perfume, expensive, floral, the kind meant to linger. I wondered if she'd sprayed it just before opening the door, like armor. I tried one more time, gentle but firm. "I built this place. I know every pipe, every nail. You think you can just—" Her smile widened. "Oh, I know you did, Abby. That's why we're ready for something new." Something new. That line cracked something open inside me. I looked past her again, taking in the hollow space that once held my life. The little rug I bought after my husband died. Gone. The framed photo of Michael at 5. Gone. Even the old clock that never kept proper time. Gone. They'd erased me as neatly as chalk wiped from a board. My fingers trembled, though my voice stayed steady. "Tell Michael," I said, "that when he's ready to talk to me, I'll be where I've always been, doing the work no one else wants to do." She tilted her head. "You don't get it, do you?" she said softly. "He doesn't want to talk. He wants to live his life without all this." She waved her hand at me, vague, dismissive. For an instant, I thought I saw guilt flicker through her expression, but then she straightened her shoulders and began closing the door. The latch clicked softly, a quiet final ending to a sentence I never thought I'd hear. I stood there long after she was gone, the hum of the old hallway light buzzing above me. The air smelled of fresh paint and cleaning chemicals. My hands ached from gripping the grocery bags. I set them down and stared at the door that used to open without hesitation. The bags sagged, the carton of milk sweating in the cold. I looked down the corridor where I'd spent years sweeping floors, patching walls, keeping tenants warm through brutal Ohio winters. My knees ached, my heart ached more, but I didn't move until the trembling eased. In that silence, I thought of my husband, the long nights he worked to help pay the mortgage, the mornings we painted these walls together, the promise we made to never sell what we built. They had changed the locks, but they had not changed me. I picked up the bags, straightened my spine, and walked toward the stairwell. Each step echoed like a memory, hollow, steady, still mine. Outside, the wind slapped cold against my face, and I breathed it in until it burned. The city lights blurred, through my tears, but I didn't wipe them away. They weren't weakness. They were truth. If Brittany thought she could take my home, she'd forgotten who built it. And somewhere deep inside me, beneath the humiliation and the hurt, something colder and sharper began to take shape. Not hatred. Hatred would have been easy. No, this was resolve, quiet, clean, unshakable. I would not beg. I would not plead. I would remember. And before winter was over, they would remember me too. The soft clicking of the engine cooling in the winter air was the only sound keeping me company. I sat there, parked across the street from my own building, watching the windows where warm yellow light spilled through the curtains. Those used to be my lights, my walls, my home. Now they were just glowing rectangles belonging to someone else. The groceries lay in the back seat, the milk turning icy, the bread stiffening at the edges. Beside them were 2 cardboard boxes holding what little I'd managed to take. A picture of Michael at 5 years old, my late husband's watch, and my church scarf that still carried a faint trace of perfume. It's strange what you cling to when everything else is stripped away. You'd think I'd be crying, but I wasn't. The tears had burned themselves out somewhere between Brittany's closing the door in my face and the first step I took toward the car. What saddened me now wasn't sadness. It was heavier. Quiet, sharp, heavy as a stone lodged under my ribs. Resentment. Every word Brittany had said looped through my mind, colder each time it replayed. We changed the locks. It's time you move on. You should be grateful. I could still hear how her voice softened on that last line, like she thought she was doing me a kindness by shoving me out of the life I built. The streetlight above the car flickered, buzzing now and then. It reminded me of the hallway light I'd been meaning to replace for months. I paid for that too, just like I paid for everything else. The taxes, the repairs, the boiler, the renovations. I'd managed that building alone for more than 20 years after my husband died. I knew every pipe's rattle, every draft in winter, every groan the walls made at night when the heat kicked on. I'd been proud of it. It was the one steady thing in a world that never stopped shifting. And now, because of a signature I hadn't seen or a lie whispered behind a closed door, I was sitting in a freezing car outside, like a stranger staring at someone else's home. I leaned back, head resting against the cold seat, and stared through the windshield. The sky was a heavy gray, the kind that promised more snow by morning. My breath fogged the glass, and I traced a small circle with my fingertip just to see the building again. From a distance, it still looked beautiful. 4 stories of solid red brick, windows in perfect rows. I used to love how it looked after a snowfall, when everything went quiet and clean. I'd stand on the porch with a cup of coffee and think, this is ours. But ours had turned into theirs. Brittany had made sure of that. I imagined her standing in my kitchen right now, opening my cabinets, deciding where her things would go. I could see her nails tapping against the countertop, giving orders in that smooth, confident voice she used when she wanted to sound gracious. And Michael, my son, would nod along, the same way he always did when someone louder, stronger, or more certain took charge. My resentment wasn't just for her. It was for him, too, for hiding behind her words, for letting her speak for both of them. for forgetting who paid the price for the life he grew up in. He once promised me he'd never forget who built it all, but tonight, he didn't even open the door. The dashboard clock glowed 12:03. I hadn't realized how long I'd been sitting there. My hands were numb inside my gloves, but I didn't turn on the heat. The cold was honest. It didn't pretend to care. I closed my eyes and listened to the city around me. A bus rolling in the distance, a dog barking somewhere down the block, the low hum of the building's boiler. That sound hit me hardest. I'd replaced that boiler myself 2 winters ago after it died during a storm. Paid for it out of my savings. Brittany and Michael didn't even know. As the hours crept on, I thought about the years I'd given to that place. Every late night spent reconciling rent logs, every Christmas alone in the basement office doing paperwork, every tenant who came to me first because I was the one they trusted. I had built something that mattered, and yet tonight I was invisible. To them, I was a burden, an obstacle, something to be cleared away. Frost inched across the windshield until the building blurred into nothing. I didn't wipe it off. Let it hide what was mine. Let it show me clearly what I'd lost and what still remained. Because I wasn't weak. Tired, yes. Older, sure, but not defeated. My name was still on that deed, locked in a folder in my downtown desk where they couldn't reach. My bank accounts were still mine, my records, my receipts, my truth. And as the sky began to lighten, stretching pale blue across the rooftops, the resentment inside me hardened into something else entirely. Resolve. If they believed they could erase me with a new lock and a few cruel words, they didn't know me at all. I'd spent a lifetime building that place. I knew how to fix things, quietly, patiently, without fanfare. And I would take it back. Not by shouting, not by begging, but by doing what I've always done best, staying calm, thinking ahead, and repairing what's broken. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine shuddered to life, warm air beginning to spill through the vents. The dashboard cast a soft glow over my steady hands. The building looked different in the dawn, smaller somehow, almost fragile. I took one last look and whispered, "You're still mine." Then I pulled onto the street, following the horizon where the sun was finally rising, toward the first step in getting everything back. The sun had barely lifted above the roofs when I pulled into the parking lot of First Ohio Bank. The air was sharp enough to sting my lungs, but I welcomed it. Cold has a way of stripping things down, your thoughts, your fear, your illusions. For a moment I sat there, watching people hurry past with their coffees and thick gloves, the whole world moving as if nothing had cracked open the night before. To them, it was just another weekday morning. To me, it was the first step toward reclaiming what was mine. When the bank doors unlocked, I stepped inside. Warmth hit me like a sudden wave, along with the faint scent of paper, ink, and the cheap coffee they brewed in the corner. The young teller behind the counter gave me that polite, measured look people offer the elderly, equal parts courtesy and impatience. I didn't blame her. I had bigger concerns. "Good morning," I said. "I'm here to see Mr. Whitman." Her fingers paused above the keyboard. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, holding her gaze, "but let him know Abby Walker is here. He'll see me." And he did. Tom Whitman had managed my accounts for 25 years. He was the one who helped my husband and me secure the loan for the building when we were young and terrified and hopeful. When I walked into his office, he stood immediately. Concern softened his features. "Abby, what brings you in so early? Is everything all right?" I sat carefully, folding my gloves on my lap like armor. "No, Tom, it isn't." Then I told him everything. Brittany changing the locks, Michael saying nothing, standing behind her like a shadow. I spoke calmly, but each word felt heavy, pulled from a place deep in my chest. Tom listened without interrupting, his hands clasped tightly on the desk. When I finished, he let out a slow breath. "I'm so sorry, don't be sorry," I said, cutting him off gently. "Help me fix it." He nodded. "What do you need?" "I want every connection between my accounts and my son removed. Every automatic transfer, every joint access, every authorization, all of it." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, but not doubt. "We can do that. It'll require signatures." "I've got time." We went page by page. He explained each form, but I barely needed the explanations. These weren't just documents. They were lines in the sand. With every signature, something shifted back where it belonged. By the 5th page, the trembling in my hands eased. By the 10th, resentment sharpened into clarity. When he opened the file for the building's operational account, he hesitated. "There's something you should know," he said quietly. "Michael has been transferring small amounts into a personal fund. Not much at a time, but consistent." My stomach tightened. "How much?" "About $800 since June." I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice, but something inside me cinched tight, like a rope pulled too quickly. It wasn't the money, it was the secrecy. The boy I'd packed lunches for and walked to school, the boy I'd worked overtime for, had been siphoning from me in silence. "It reminds me of the day my father told me I'd never make it on my own," I murmured. "I proved him wrong once, I'll do it again." Tom didn't offer pity. That was one of the reasons I trusted him. He simply handed me the next form. When I finally reached the document requesting a freeze on all future transfer attempts, I signed my name slowly, pressing the pen down until the ink darkened. My name, steady, unshaken, mine. "Thank you," I said as I stood. Tom's expression softened. "You've always been stronger than you think, Abby." "I know," I said, "but they don't." Outside, the light had grown brighter, though the snow on the sidewalks was still thin and dirty from the morning traffic. I tightened my husband's old coat around me and headed down the street toward Lakeview Property Management. My knees complained, but I walked faster than I had in months. Daniel Brooks looked up from his computer as soon as I stepped through the door, his glasses sliding halfway down his nose. "Mrs. Walker, you're here early. Everything okay?" "I need your help, Daniel." "Of course," he said, rising immediately. I set my purse on his desk and met his eyes. "I want every building access code changed today. All digital locks, tenant entries, basement and storage units. Everything. And make sure Unit 1A is secure." His eyebrows rose. "That's your apartment, isn't it?" "It was," I said, "and it will be again." Daniel hesitated just long enough to pull up the registry file. I watched the reflection of the screen slide across his glasses. "Owner," he read softly, "Abby Walker, sole proprietor, no transfers." A small smile tugged at his mouth. "Still yours." Something inside me loosened, some knot I'd been holding tight since last night. Those 2 words were a balm I hadn't known I needed. "Should I restrict access for your son?" he asked. "Especially him." He typed quickly, the familiar click-clack of the keys filling the small room. When the system chimed, a soft, digital confirmation, it felt like the first clean breath I'd taken in hours. "All set," he said. "Everything secure." I steadied myself on the edge of the desk. "Thank you." He hesitated, then asked gently, "You're not planning to go back there tonight, are you?" "No," I said, "not yet." I could have stormed back in, demanded justice, slammed my hand on the door, but I chose something quieter, something that would echo longer. Silence. For my son. So that one. Day, when he finally understands what he traded away, the silence will be the thing he remembers most. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of distant snow and morning traffic. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the washed-out sky. The cold bit straight through my coat, but I didn't mind it. For the first time since they shut me out of my own home, I felt steady. Brittany's words tugged at the edges of my memory. "You should be grateful we're giving you this much time." Well, she'd had her time. Now it was mine. And before the sun set again, every lock they thought they controlled would close behind them instead. The air smelled like snow again as I walked back toward the building that afternoon. The sidewalks were slick, my boots crunching softly over the thin sheet of ice. It felt strange to approach that familiar red brick place, not as someone returning home, but as someone reclaiming it. The sun hung low, its pale light glinting off the frost-lined windows. My heart beat steadily, not from peace, but from purpose. I'd spent a lifetime fixing broken things. Today, I was fixing the last one, myself. From across the street, the building looked almost gentle, the way it had on the day my husband and I first bought it. I could hear the faint hum of the radiators through the walls, smell bacon drifting from someone's kitchen. The tenants were moving through their lives, unaware the locks had changed again, unaware the power in this place had quietly shifted back to the woman who built it. I wasn't angry at them. They had simply lived here. I had protected them, even when my own son didn't protect me. When I pushed open the front door, the new access code blinked green beneath my fingertips. That soft electronic beep sounded like victory. The hallway was warm, the walls freshly painted in the same soft yellow I'd chosen years ago. As I climbed the stairs, I let my hand trail along the railing, remembering all the times I'd carried groceries, patched cracks, helped tenants sort their mail. I had been the backbone of this place, and somehow they all forgot. My resentment toward Brittany had changed by then. It was no longer sharp. It had cooled into something steady, something that didn't flare but reminded me to stay alert. Her words still echoed in my mind, the way she'd told me to be grateful, the little smile she wore as she closed the door in my face. I used to think people like her didn't understand kindness. Now I knew she understood it perfectly. She just mistook it for weakness. I paused near the mailboxes and brushed my fingers over the brass nameplates. Some letters had faded, but mine still caught the light. Walker. Worn down, but permanent. Carved deeper than neglect or betrayal could ever erase. That was enough. A door clicked open on the second floor. Mrs. Henderson stepped out with her trash, her gray hair pinned back, her face lined but warm. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Abby, is that really you? We thought you moved out." "Not exactly," I said with a small smile. "Just had some things to straighten out." She nodded, relieved. "We heard someone new was taking over. I didn't believe it." "You were right not to," I said quietly. "Everything's fine now." Her smile lingered as she slipped back into her apartment. That simple moment, being recognized, remembered, warmed me more than the radiators ever could. I kept walking until I reached the door to my apartment. It stood closed, but I didn't need to open it. I already knew what I'd find. A stripped-down space, perhaps hollow, perhaps cold. It didn't matter. The lock now answered to me alone. Somewhere across town, Brittany and Michael would soon discover that their cards no longer worked, their transfers were frozen, their access revoked. I wondered what Brittany would say when the door refused to open for her. Probably something cutting, probably blame. She'd insist I was ungrateful, that I'd turned against my own family. But the truth was simple. I had stopped letting people take from me just because they wanted to. I leaned against the wall for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the building systems. Steady again, alive in a way it hadn't felt in years. I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of clean paint, faint dust, and something new. Quiet relief. A memory rose unexpectedly, the first time I held Michael after he was born. His tiny fingers had curled around mine with such trust. His father had stood beside me, proud and certain. Back then, I could never have imagined that the same boy would grow into a man who'd stand silently while his wife shut me out of my own home. The ache of that truth ran deep, deeper than anger, but for the first time, it didn't make my knees weaken. It made me straighten my spine. I took one last look around before heading back toward the entrance. The late afternoon light spilled through the small window at the end of the hallway, washing everything in gold. The world looked softer, more balanced, like something had quietly shifted back into place. Outside, the wind cut sharp across my face. The snow had begun again, soft flakes catching on the ends of my scarf. Behind me, the building stood strong and still. My building, my life. Soon they would arrive. Confusion, panic, angry calls to the bank, frantic emails to the property office. None of it would matter. I didn't need to be there to witness it. I had already won, silently, cleanly, without raising my voice or breaking a single thing. My revenge wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It lived in the quiet certainty that what was mine was safe again. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid to walk away. I was already awake when the phone started buzzing on the table beside me. Michael's name lit up the screen, vibrating in the quiet room, but I didn't reach for it. I just watched it ring, small, insistent, meaningless now. Outside the window, the early light was soft and gray. Overnight, another thin blanket of snow had fallen. The roofs across the street looked dusted in sugar, untouched and still. Everything was calm, everything except that phone. I let it ring until it stopped, then turned it face down. By then, I knew exactly why he was calling. The bank accounts were frozen. The locks were changed. The title, once the foundation of Brittany's false confidence, had been confirmed as mine and mine alone. I could almost picture her face when her code blinked red, when her card was declined, when the illusion finally cracked. A brief sting of resentment rose in me, sharp and familiar, but it didn't linger. I had carried that weight too long. What remained now was quiet, steady satisfaction. They had taken from me my home, my trust, my sense of safety, and expected me to fade away without a sound. But instead of anger, I answered them with silence. People like Brittany don't know what to do with silence. It forces them to hear their own noise. I dressed slowly, pulling on my heavy wool coat, wrapping a scarf around my neck. When I stepped outside, the wind rushed against my face. Cold, clean, honest. I walked the 2 blocks to the little cafe on the corner, the one with chipped tables and the smell of cinnamon rolls drifting from the kitchen. The bell above the door jingled. The young man behind the counter gave me a polite smile, and I found myself smiling back. I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone looked at me without judgment or pity. I ordered black coffee and settled into a seat by the window. Outside, the world moved steadily, cars passing, people hurrying to work, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like life was happening without me. My phone buzzed again, another call from Michael. Then a call from an unfamiliar number, Brittany, no doubt. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup and took a slow sip. I didn't block them. I simply let the calls come. They had spent months treating me like I didn't matter, making decisions as if I were already gone. I remembered the way Brittany had smiled when she said, "You should be grateful." That smile must look different now. Gratitude wasn't working in her favor anymore. My resentment hadn't disappeared. It had shifted. It wasn't a wound now, it was a lesson. Around noon, I left a tip on the table and headed back toward the building. The snow was melting into slow, steady drips from the gutters. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and chimney smoke. As I turned the corner, I saw Michael's car parked out front. He stood by the door, hands in his pockets, staring at the locked entrance as if it were a puzzle he couldn't solve. Brittany was beside him, phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp enough to cut from half a block away. She gestured toward the door, pacing, pointing, every movement frantic, brittle. The same arrogance she'd worn the night she shut me out was still there, but it had cracked around the edges. Underneath it, I saw the truth. Panic. I stopped down the block and watched them. Michael looked smaller somehow, tired, ashamed, like he finally understood the cost of his silence. I didn't feel joy watching them struggle, but I felt something close to justice. I didn't approach them. I didn't call out. My silence was already saying everything they needed to hear. Behind them, the building stood steady, its windows glowing against the snow-streaked glass. It looked like it had years ago when my husband was still alive. Solid, safe, unquestionably mine. I turned before they noticed me and continued down the street. My steps felt lighter than they had in months. The resentment that once filled me had settled into something cleaner. Clarity. They would rebuild their lives however they wanted, but they would do it without what they tried to steal. That night, I sat by the window with the lights off, watching the city move beneath a soft veil of falling snow. The phone lay silent beside me now. No buzzing, no pleas, no noise. Just peace. Not the peace that comes from forgiving others, but the peace that comes from finally forgiving yourself for letting them hurt you. I thought of my husband then, of the long nights we spent making a home, of the promise we made to protect what we built. I had kept that promise, maybe not how either of us imagined, but in the way that mattered most. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let a small smile curve across my lips. They had taken everything they could, except the one thing they never understood. You can't steal a person's strength, you can only reveal it. So let me say this once, for anyone who's ever been left out in the cold by those they loved most. Don't wait for permission to reclaim your life. You already have everything you need, just the courage to begin.